Let's start today with something that might surprise you. Most companies talk about digital transformation, are actually not transforming anything. They're digitizing, they're automating, they're implementing, but they're actually not really transforming. And I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I say it because after more than a decade working inside Salesforce implementations, across industries, across clouds, from small businesses to very large organizations, I've seen this following pattern again and again. You get a new system, do a big launch, executives getting excited, consultancy comes in with all kinds of fantastic slide decks, we see roadmaps, we might even start talking AI conversations, and then we have this big go live celebration. And then after 6 months, what do we see? Same behavior, same silos, same habits, same workarounds, same complaints, but all of that now inside a very expansive platform. And Salesforce often does get labeled at our digital transformation initiative. But there's an uncomfortable question on the back of this. Was it transformation or was it just an installation? And today I want to start diving into this. Not to critique technology, not to critique Salesforce itself, not to dismiss innovation, not to resist AI, but actually to go back to where does transformation actually lives. It lives in behavior, in operations, and in capability. Because let's be honest, digital transformation just sounds so powerful. It signals progress and modernizations, innovation, future readiness. Boards will start to feel confident. Investors are reassured. We have an excited leadership team. But somewhere along the way, this phrase has really become simplified. It starts meaning things like buying new technology, moving to the cloud, implementing Salesforce, adding automation, maybe even introducing AI. Now, don't get me wrong, these things can really all be part of transformation, but they're not transformation by default. Installing Salesforce does not transfer our sales culture. Turning on Sales Cloud does not transfer customer care behavior. Adding dashboard does not transfer decision-making discipline. And launching Agentforce does not transfer our data quality. Technology is an enabler. And transformation is a shift in how people think, work, decide, and behave. And that is where a lot of companies fall short. So let's strip out some of these buzzwords. Transformation happens on 3 levels: behavioral, operational, and capability. So let's dive into those a little bit. Let's first talk about behavioral transformation. Now that is a layer where nobody really does a proper budget. Behavioral transformation means things like sales teams stop hoarding information. Managers stop managing by instinct. It really means people should trust the system. They use it consistently, input clean data, follow defined process, collaborate transparently. It's not technical, it's human. And that is where I come into play. Training, enablement, capability building, all of that becomes really critical. Because behavior doesn't just change when the software changes. It changes when people understand the why, and you always hear me talking about that. It also happens when people see personal relevance, when they feel confident and they are supported consistently. If you don't change behavior, your digital transformation is just a cosmetic thing. Now let's talk about operational transformation. Here is where the processes are simplified, clarified, and aligned. True operational transformation means processes are redesigned, not just copied into Salesforce. We remove duplications. Our approval processes are rationalized. Reporting structures reflect reality. Teams work in alignment instead of parallel chaos. And in too many organizations, digitize broken processes. They just take a messy existing broken process, add automation, add validation rules, add required fields. And what you now just have is a very messy digital process. Again, that is not transformation. That is building more digital bureaucracy. Operational transformation requires stepping back and actually asking yourself as an organization, why do we do things in this way? What outcome do we actually want to drive? Where do we have overcomplicated things? Why are we protecting bad habits? Answering those questions can really take courage because it goes into a very uncomfortable level about actually thinking what are our people doing and how do we as an organization operate. Now, lastly, I talk about capability transformation. And it's an area where a lot of people just ignore it. Because you can implement the best CRM in the world. But if your users don't understand data principles, can't interpret a dashboard, don't know how to prioritize leads or understand life stages, and have never been trained role specifically, again, you don't have transformation. You have unused potential. If you really want to be good at capability building, what you have to look at is role-based learning, practical exercises, contextual examples, clear expectations, and ongoing reinforcement. It means reducing people to the power of the platform. Then you start talking about transformation. Now, the challenge is that sales is often positioned as a transformation engine. And to be honest, it really can be. It is an incredible, powerful thing. I always call it the big beast. It can do so much in an organization across all different areas. But in itself, Salesforce doesn't help you fixing cultural silos. It doesn't help you fixing poor management discipline or unclear KPIs. It doesn't help you if there's a fear for accountability or if there's a lack of training. When I go into organizations and I start talking with people, especially with subject matter experts, I often see this pattern. The system works, it's not really broken, but what you see that adoption is shallow. Usage is inconsistent, reports are questions, managers often go back to manual checks, and people say Salesforce doesn't really work for us. But when we start digging deeper, we find that the issue is actually not the configuration of the system. It often is clarity, it's confidence, and it's consistency. And that is not a tech problem. That is behavioral and a capability gap. Now let's reflect with what I started with this session. It's like most companies talk about digital transformation are actually not transforming anything. And you start to see why that is. Because in a lot of instances, the behavior stays the same. The processes stay the same. They stay chaotic. We keep having skills that are underdeveloped. All of that means you didn't transform, you just installed. And an installation is absolutely not evolution. Now, for me, there's a lot of danger about the buzzword digital transformation. And the reason for that is sort of trying to create this illusion of progress. Executives start to feel like, yeah, we're moving forward. We're getting into the new century. We're becoming this tech focused and we get these things online. And boards start to feel reassured and the roadmaps really start to look impressive with all these little things that are starting to pop up. But actually, if you start to go to backhand and actually start diving a little bit deeper and go underneath all these layers, what you'll find is that a lot of teams are just still struggling with what they're doing. A lot of users will have low confidence. Data quality is and will stay inconsistent. And a lot of user frustration just simmers in this low level of area. And then we start talking already about the next wave, AI, automation, advanced analytics. But then we have to do a bit of a reality check. Before you can start automation, you have to do alignment. Before you start talking AI, you have to talk about accuracy. And before you start to scale your system, you have to think about skill. If your foundation isn't strong, adding more layers just increases complexity. And that's why I often talk about going back to the core. And that's not talking about going backwards, it's going back to clarity. Because transformation shouldn't be about adding more, it always is about simplifying. So what does it look like when you do a digital transformation properly? It should look like leaders are using dashboards consistently. Every team meeting, every chat they're having with people, they just open up the dashboards and talk numbers. Teams trust the shared data. They know that when they put data in the system, everybody does it the same way, and they trust everybody to use it properly. We have clear processes defined, a big challenge that a lot of organizations have. We also do role-specific capability. Who needs to know what? And we base our training on that. We make sure there are not too many workarounds. And all of that will drive higher confidence and a lot less noise. Other sort of things look less chaotic, less flashy, and we need to become more disciplined. And all of that, it often requires fewer tools, not more. It doesn't require you to completely change your Salesforce instance or start to add in more stuff. Actually scraping it down and making sure it is what it needs to be. Real transformation feels operationally smoother. It doesn't need to feel like constant reinventing, and it absolutely doesn't rely on hype. Now let's close this session off. If you are in an organization calling your Salesforce implementation digital transformation, Pause for a moment and ask yourself the following questions. What behaviors has changed? What complexity in your operational area has reduced? What new capabilities were built? What habits have been unlearned? If you can't answer these or are not exactly sure about those, then you're not there yet. You have more work to do. And again, that's not a criticism, it's an opportunity. Because transformation is not a launch event, it's a capability journey. It's behavioral evolution, it's operational maturity. And technology, and especially sales in there, can be a really, really powerful enabler. But Salesforce itself is not the transformation that you're looking for. The transformation happens with your people. And that is where the real work begins. Hope you enjoyed your session. Looking forward to you next time.